In a remote region of Siberia, where winter seems to freeze time itself and night dominates almost the entire year, there is a small village forgotten by the world called Yalovka. There, residents avoid talking about an ancient, deep crater that mysteriously appeared over a decade ago in the middle of the dense forest. They say that whoever approaches that dark maw either doesn't return, or when they do, they are never the same. The story I'm about to tell originates in this gloomy place and features a young man named Ivan, only 22 years old, who decided to defy the collective fear to discover what lay within that hole. Ivan was known for his insatiable curiosity and a need to prove that the village's accounts were exaggerations, born of superstition. He knew his grandmother avoided going near the crater and that several people had disappeared there, but this only fueled his desire to unravel the mystery. On a freezing December morning, his eyes red from the biting wind, he set off into the forest, equipped only with a flashlight, a rope, and his camera. Upon reaching the crater, he felt an inexplicable shiver. The air seemed too dense, and a heavy silence filled the space as if something were waiting for him. As he approached the edge, Ivan noticed a shadow moving in the depths, a diffused figure almost impossible to describe that disappeared and reappeared, as if playing with his mind. His flashlight flickered for a few seconds, and in that moment, a guttural scream cut through the silence, not a human scream, but something beyond the world of the living. Ivan stumbled and fell into the hole. His fall was swift, and when he hit the bottom, he was in a place that seemed like a distortion of reality. Walls of black stone, unbreathable air, and an odor of death so strong it almost made him faint. As he tried to find a way out, Ivan felt invisible presences brushing against his skin, whispering indecipherable words that seemed to tear away pieces of his sanity. He tried to use the rope, but it seemed to vanish in his hands, as if it didn't belong in that place. Hours or perhaps days later, he could no longer distinguish time. The young man began to hear footsteps, more real than anything he had experienced until then. A hoarse, deliberate voice repeatedly called his name, and when he turned, he saw human figures with black, empty eyes slowly approaching, their faces disfigured by something that looked like ancestral hatred. At the moment he thought all was lost, Ivan felt an invisible force dragging him out of the crater. When he woke up, he was lying in the snow near the village, but his eyes had changed. Now they reflected the emptiness of the abyss where he had been trapped. He never spoke about what he saw, but he was changed forever. His friends noticed he wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating properly, and seemed to live in another world. Months later, Ivan disappeared without a trace, like many before him. The crater remains there, silent and threatening, awaiting its next victim. While the village continues its life, a curious fact intrigued the residents. Every time someone disappeared, a strange mark appeared in the snow near the crater. A kind of symbol made with deep claw marks, as if something was marking who would be the next to vanish. Science has never been able to explain the origin of the crater or the presence of these marks, and the legend continues to grow among the few who still dare to speak about the matter. In another part of the planet, on the coast of Scotland, near the cliffs of Dunrath, a young woman named Fiona experienced something as disturbing as Ivan's, but with an inexplicable connection to the sea. Fiona had always been fascinated by stories of sea creatures and local legends about beings that inhabited the depths. On a stormy night, while walking alone on the beach, she saw a bluish light emerging from the waves like a beacon from the bottom of the ocean. Without thinking, Fiona walked into the water, feeling a magnetic pull towards the light. The deeper she went, the less cold or pressure she felt. Suddenly, a cold hand grabbed her ankle, and a hoarse voice whispered her name. She tried to scream, but the voice calmed her, promising to reveal ancient secrets that would forever change her life and destiny. Fiona was led to a submerged cave where humanoid beings with translucent skin and glowing eyes awaited her. They said they belonged to a lost civilization and sought a host to continue their existence among humans. Fiona resisted, but gradually felt her mind being invaded by memories that were not hers. Past eras, underwater wars, and sacrificial rituals. The presence of these beings was suffocating, and she realized that her own soul was being fragmented. When she finally managed to escape the cave, she returned to the beach. But something had changed. Her veins glowed blue, and during full moon nights, she heard chants calling her to return to the depths. The residents of the nearest village began to report strange phenomena, such as dead fish appearing on the coast and waves forming incomprehensible symbols in the sand. Fiona disappeared on one of these nights, and the sea seemed to swallow any trace of her. The local legend says that on stormy nights her voice can be heard mixed with the sound of the waves, warning the living about what lurks below. These two stories are just a fragment of what exists in places forgotten by time, where the supernatural and fear walk hand in hand. Stories of disappearances, encounters with the inexplicable, and marks that can never be erased. We now move to a forgotten region in rural Mexico, a small isolated community nestled in the mountains where silence is broken only by wails that seem to echo from another dimension. There lived Mateo, a 35-year-old man known as a collector of local stories, always willing to listen to the darkest accounts the elders whispered, almost as if they feared something might overhear them. One night during one of his walks, he came across an abandoned house he had never noticed before, despite living there for years. The house had a heavy aura, as if it held ancestral secrets and an evil that had never been purged. Curiosity led him to enter, despite all warnings from the residents. Inside, he found a room with ancient symbols painted on the walls, in colors that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. In the center of the room, an old, dust-covered diary awaited to be opened. Its content revealed forbidden rituals, performed to open portals between our world and the realm of shadows. Mateo felt a chill that pierced his bones as he realized that those pages narrated events that were happening in real time, as if the diary was some kind of connection to something beyond human understanding. The next day, rumors began to circulate through the village. People started disappearing, and a sense of terror gripped the place. The victims left no traces except for strange marks on their skin, marks that, according to legends, indicated they had been touched by the other side. Mateo, burdened by what he discovered, tried to warn the residents, but no one wanted to listen. His voice was lost amidst the collective fear and the silence imposed by an invisible evil. As night fell, what seemed to be a simple village transformed into a stage of invisible horrors. Ownerless footsteps echoed through the streets. Doors slammed shut on their own, and muffled screams permeated the air. Mateo felt he was not alone, that something was watching him, waiting for the right moment to claim his soul. That same night, he disappeared. All that remained was the diary open to the last page, where a message written in blood simply said, "They are among us." Meanwhile, in a town in rural Ukraine, another terrifying story took shape. Elena, a woman in her 40s, lived alone in an isolated house by the edge of a frozen lake. She had gone through a traumatic divorce and sought refuge in solitude. But what she found was even more terrifying. During a harsh winter, she began to hear whispers coming from the lake, especially at night. Initially, she believed them to be merely products of her tired mind, but the whispers became clearer, almost imperative. One night, Elena saw a figure emerge from the ice, a being that blended human and bestial characteristics, with empty eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. The creature not only spoke, but demanded companionship to cross the lake, promising power and freedom in exchange for her soul. The woman, desperate, refused, but the visits became frequent and violent, to the point where her house was consumed by a dark energy, and objects moved on their own, as if the very air was contaminated by a malignant presence. Elena tried to flee, but felt her legs lock as if bound by invisible chains. The terror peaked when the creature finally dragged her into the lake, where she disappeared beneath the ice. The next day, the lake seemed normal, but fishermen reported a strange bluish mist hovering over the waters and a feeling of anguish that prevented them from approaching. Elena's house was never inhabited again, and it is at this point that I ask, if you are enjoying these stories, please subscribe to the channel so that we can continue to explore together the darkest mysteries the world hides. If you have ever had an experience that defies logic, tell us about it in the comments. It doesn't have to be something huge. Even that strange shiver you felt when you heard an unexpected noise is enough. Let's create a community that understands the weight of real fear without judgment, just support and stories to share. After all, who knows what truly lies beyond the veil of reality? In the heart of Tanzania, in an isolated village surrounded by dense tropical forests, a tale runs that makes the elders whisper with fear and the young hesitate to venture out after sunset. The story revolves around a 30-year-old woman named Amina, known for being a respected healer among her people, but who harbored a terrible secret. She possessed the rare ability to converse with spirits, a gift many envied, but one that also came with a price few were willing to pay. It all began when Amina was called to help a family who believed they were being tormented by an entity that stole the lives of children during the night. Amina performed an ancient ritual to try to contain the curse, but upon invoking the spirit to negotiate, something went wrong. Instead of controlling the entity, she ended up attracting an even darker shadow, a presence that sought not only the souls of the children, but the very essence of the living. In the following weeks, the village was gripped by a series of inexplicable events. Children fell ill without reason, adults disappeared, and a black mist seemed to spread through the trees, as if the forest itself were dying. Amina began to hear whispering voices that pursued her in dreams and during the day. She tried to resist, but her body weakened, and her mind was lost in a labyrinth of nightmares and hallucinations. On a fateful night, Amina was last seen walking into the forest with a lit candle towards the place where she had performed the ritual. The villagers heard screams that pierced the night, but no one dared to follow. When the sun rose, all they found was a circle of burnt earth and absolute silence. They say the shadow still inhabits that place, and that whoever approaches may feel the pain and fear that consumed Amina. Descending into the gray cities of Russia, we find another story that chills to the bone. In St. Petersburg lived Dmitry, a 28-year-old amateur photographer who was interested in exploring abandoned places, especially old buildings with macabre histories. He once visited a psychiatric hospital, closed since the 60s, known for cruel practices and mysterious disappearances of patients. As he walked through the dark, graffiti-filled corridors, Dmitry felt a strange presence. He started taking pictures, but his photos revealed something terrifying: distorted shadows that seemed to move, faces that appeared and disappeared between the walls. In one of the rooms, he found an old, rusty wheelchair where he felt a cold touch on his shoulder. He turned to find nothing, but the weight of the presence was undeniable. That night, Dmitry began to have vivid nightmares about the former patients, especially a woman who, according to legend, had been locked alive in that room for weeks. She screamed for freedom, and her screams seemed to echo inside Dmitry's mind, who would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling inexplicable marks on his arms. The encounters increased until, one dawn, he disappeared without a trace, leaving his camera behind, with the last photos showing a figure emerging from the shadows. These stories show how the supernatural can consume the human soul, whether in forgotten forests, abandoned houses, or frozen lakes. It is a grim reminder that there are forces beyond our comprehension that can pull us into the abyss when we least expect it. In the heart of Nepal's mountainous region, an ancient village holds a secret that has haunted its inhabitants for centuries. The legend speaks of a hidden cave in the mountains, where voices echo that drive mad anyone who dares to listen. There lived Rajan, a 27-year-old man who, driven by a thirst for knowledge and courage, decided to explore the forbidden place. Rajan was a scholar of local traditions, and he had heard stories from the elders that the cave was a portal to a world where the dead walked among the living. Against all warnings, he equipped himself with a flashlight and some instruments to record his journey. Upon entering the cave, the air changed. It became heavy, charged with an energy that seemed to drain life. As he advanced, the voices began, distorted whispers, mixing ancient languages and unintelligible sounds. With each step, Rajan felt his mind fragmenting, his thoughts blurring with memories that were not his own. The feeling of being watched, grew until an enormous shadow materialized, enveloped by a dense black mist. Rajan tried to flee, but the path behind him seemed to have disappeared. Trapped in that underground prison, he succumbed to madness, screaming for help that never came. The next morning, nearby villagers heard his screams echoing through the mountains, but when they reached the cave's entrance, they found only silence and Rajan's flashlight lying on the ground, still lit. He was never seen again, but they say his voices still echo among the rocks, calling for help and warning about what lurks beyond the veil of life. Moving to Central America, in a dense forest in Guatemala, the story of Carla, a 33-year-old teacher, reveals another type of terror. Carla had always had a special connection with nature and enjoyed hiking alone, seeking peace away from the noise of cities. During a walk, she found an ancient Mayan ruin covered in vegetation, with inscriptions and symbols that seemed to pulse under the touch of the sun. In that place, Carla felt a presence watching her, an invisible and heavy gaze that penetrated her soul. During the following nights, she began to dream of ancient rituals, with hooded figures and chants that woke her up in a cold sweat. The boundaries between dream and reality began to blur, and Carla felt her mind being dominated by thoughts that were not her own. When she finally tried to seek help, she realized no one would believe her stories. In her last message, she wrote that she felt she was transforming, that an ancestral force was taking over her, seeking a body to remain among the living. Carla disappeared without explanation, and the forest where the ruin was located was avoided by everyone. These stories show us that fear can manifest in various forms, but they all have something in common: the feeling of being watched, the loss of control, and the encounter with the inexplicable that changes forever those who experience it. In the remote corners of Scotland, in a small village nestled among mist-covered hills, a chilling account echoes among the oldest residents. Ian, a 40-year-old man known for his knowledge of antiques, inherited an old mansion that had been abandoned for decades. Curious, he decided to explore it and discover what that time-forgotten place held. Upon entering, Ian immediately felt an invisible pressure oppressing him, as if the walls breathed and held stories of suffering and pain. In the house's basement, he found a chest full of macabre objects and old letters that narrated family tragedies marked by violent deaths and obscure pacts made to protect secrets that should never be revealed. Each letter seemed to carry the anguish and despair of the former residents. In the following weeks, Ian began to witness strange phenomena: voices whispering his name, shadows moving without origin, and a constant feeling of being watched. One night, he was awakened by intense cold and a scream coming from the basement. Upon descending, he found the chest open and a manuscript with a message written in ink that seemed alive. "Free what is trapped here, and the terror will be eternal." The man, consumed by curiosity and fear, couldn't resist trying to unravel the mystery, but each attempt seemed to deepen the curse hanging over him. What was a healthy interest soon became a desperate struggle for survival, as the dark past of that mansion began to haunt Ian, pushing him to the brink of sanity. Elsewhere on the planet, in Australia, a young woman named Mia, 26, lived near a desert known for being the scene of strange phenomena. Mia was an artist who sought inspiration in solitude, but everything changed when she found a strange stone, covered with symbols she had never seen before. The stone seemed to radiate a dense energy, and since she brought it home, nights of nightmares and apparitions began to torment her. The figures that appeared in her dreams seemed to want something from her, whispering ancient secrets and promising a power Mia didn't understand. Over time, her paintings began to change, depicting grim scenes that the artist herself didn't remember creating. When she tried to get rid of the stone, it mysteriously reappeared, always nearby, as if it had a will of its own. The local community believes that Mia is trapped in a cycle where the cursed object dominates her, transforming her creativity into a curse. To this day, few approach her house, fearing what they might find or awaken. These stories, full of horrors and mysteries, make us reflect on the limits of what we can face and how much the unknown can change our lives forever. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for following these narratives that defy reason and awaken our deepest fears. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next accounts we'll bring. Share your experiences with the community and tell us in the comments what you thought of these stories and what they awakened in you. Together, we are stronger to face what lies beyond the veil of reality. This was our dive into the heaviest and most disturbing supernatural. I hope you felt the shiver down your spine and learned to respect the secrets the world hides. Until the next encounter, with new stories that will make your heart race and your mind question what is real.